Okay, DeLoss, you please start with Lauren Lurkins with the Illinois Farm Bureau. Let's start talking about the Farm Bill.
I'm really intrigued about how this is going to go. So it'll be a 23 Farm Bill. The 96 Farm Bill was supposed to be the 94 Farm Bill. The 2014 Farm Bill was supposed to be the 2012 Farm Bill. And, a lot of this could just be based upon who will be writing or which party will be writing the Farm Bill. Lauren, when you think about, crop insurance certainly comes to mind, but what are a couple of things that are a little more in your purview?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of builds off of what Ken was talking about before, and I mentioned this a little bit in the presentation this morning. I obviously work in the environment, the conservation world, which is always a huge part of a Farm Bill negotiation, in addition to nutrition and Title I. But that dynamic of that negotiation has changed with the announcement of the Inflation Reduction Act. So the $90 billion that Ken talked about, 19.5 of that billion dollars has gone through NRCS, which is a part of the USDA. And interestingly enough, the conversation was around climate and conservation, but the press release out of NRCS had everything to do with nitrogen and nitrogen management. So that's interesting to me in the work that I do, both for water quality and conservation. But I think, I have some meetings set even before the end of this month to learn more from NRCS what that actually means today out of that 19.5 billion. So regardless, I think the agencies the USDA itself is working on figuring out how that is going to look immediately, and then we all are figuring out what that's going to look like for negotiation. So in theory, you've got environment and conservation stakeholders that have quite a bit of what they usually come to the table asking for.
That was one of the questions, and Illinois Farm Bureau opposed the Inflation Reduction Act, and part of the question was, so are we going to fund these things that are Farm Bill funding, or are we going to fund them somewhere else, or is there more money coming, or
Right.
how does all of that work? It's interesting to see how that develops.
All good questions.
Yeah. At the Farm Progress Show last week, there was a panel. There were 6 legislators, including Minority Leader G.T. Thompson from Pennsylvania. There were 3 from Iowa. Representative Davis was there. There was a representative from Missouri, and then Representative Thompson, who said, if the Republicans are writing the Farm Bill, it will not be a climate bill. I'd be curious, from our elected officials, when you say something like that, it doesn't mean you're anti-climate, but just how that sort of thing is perceived and how you weave things now in throughout legislative and through writing bills like that.
And DeLoss, I think one of the participants was Senator Annette Sweeney from Iowa. She is the first vice president on the State Ag and Rural Leaders Group, and I can hear that coming from Annette. And you're absolutely right. It isn't that we are going to ignore climate issues. The focus needs to be on agriculture and agribusiness. First of all, it is such a small part of the Farm Bill to begin with, which is by design. But if we start incorporating and making the climate issue the number one part of what is to be the Farm Bill, we'll never get the Farm Bill done. And we'll be going back to 2014, and let's just rewrite what we had then. So it isn't that these legislators want to ignore climate issues. These producers deal with climate issues all day, every day. And fortunately, we have people like Brendan and his industry that is doing the research to try to combat not having enough rain, having too much rain, whatever it might be. So I think that they are good stewards of their land, and they want to do the very best they can dealing with the climate issues, but they don't want to make it the focus of the Farm Bill.
Crop insurance will certainly be a key part of it, and I feel like a lot of the, in fact, talking to Representative Bustos, at State Fair. They had a listening session at the State Fair, also in the Department of Ag building, and she said the message has been heard pretty clear of don't mess with crop insurance, essentially. Does that sound like around the room, from our farmers, that seemed like one of the things that we've had, like in 2012 when we had the drought, we didn't have to come asking for more money because we had a good crop insurance program in place. I think one of the questions, though, will be just how much is crop insurance going to cost, going back to $6 corn, but having it in place would be vitally important.
I know times have changed, but I think one of the dangerous things out there is the press, which beyond the farm press is usually as uninformed as any first grader, but they talk about, will the Republicans write the farm bill or will the Democrats write the farm bill? I remember when I was in Washington, a speechwriter for Secretary of Agriculture Butts, and it was in the midst of negotiations for a farm bill, and they finally got to the point where they're going to announce the details. And I happened to luckily been riding with the secretary up to Capitol Hill. That was back when they had bag phones instead of these devices, and I remember that Butts got on the phone and called the chief negotiator in the U.S. Senate on the Democrat side so that he could be present for the announcement, and so that maybe things tilted a little way toward what Butts wanted. But the point was, they all agreed they needed to come together and make it a farm bill that wasn't Republican or Democrat. And I wish, and I hope we can get back to that, or we may find that things that we all think are important to be in a farm bill may not be there because of some dumb deal or something else that's made. So I think that's a great concern for the year ahead.
Representative Swanson?
Yeah, I agree with Ken. It needs to be a bill we can all agree on. And, there is some discussion of separating out the food program from the farm bill. And as that raises its head every time we talk about farm bill. And that would water down the bill even more and should remain a part of the bill. As far as the insurance, it's been the life raft for many farmers through the years. Right now in our areas, we've got great looking crops. My son up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, who was agronomist for a seed company up there, they're harvesting 20 bushel corn. And many farmers can't survive on 20 bushel corn. The dairy farmers are paying $100 an acre to come harvest that corn just to put it in their silos to feed their livestock. So there needs to be a net, some type of a net there of protections.
Yeah, you're right. I was talking with an Illinois Corn Board member, Terry West, Rob, you probably, or Terry Smith rather, and he had to utilize crop insurance in 2012 when the drought was occurring, and he said, it's not like anybody wants to use this. It's like if your house catches on fire, you just need it to sustain. Nobody ever said, hey, glad my house burned down, I got a bigger house. It doesn't work that way. It's about sustaining. What do you see from the Illinois Corn Marketing Board for our growers? What's the most important thing for the Farm Bill?
Well, I think has already been mentioned that crop insurance is the one constant that has worked, and you've avoided all the ad hoc disaster stuff that wound up costing more, and you probably helped people less when it went down those routes. So crop insurance is the big one, and I think over time it's tended to be a collaborative effort in the past between parties, and based on the having the SNAP or food assistance part of it, that was the part they kind of rallied around, and everything else kind of fell into place based on that being part of it. So let's hope that continues to, and it does not become a climate dominated kind of discussion, or we probably are in trouble. So
Lauren Lurkins?
I was going to ask, does carbon come up in any
Yeah.
of this, do you think, in next year?
DeLoss makes me nervous with his additional questions. So on the point of a climate carbon bill, I almost start to use them synonymously now, even though that's not true because the verbiage gets a little confused. But I work on, as we talked about this morning, a number of environmental issues, and the USDA NRCS conservation programs, which are voluntary, incentive-based, they're an answer for a lot of on-farm conservation. They started because of the Dust Bowl and soil conservation. We've got aspects that are water quality improvements. Obviously, there's some climate aspects and some carbon sequestration, but the data on just what you can do on the farm and how much you can sequester in the soil carbon we still have a lot to learn as a country and really globally. So I think it's not even doing service to the programs themselves just to call them climate, because they are beneficial for a lot of other reasons. The other point I would make is that the demand on these programs here in the state of Illinois is real, and we do have a lot of farmers that do utilize these USDA programs for what they are today, for the resource concerns that they have. It doesn't make it easy to follow the rules and get the money, but there is demand for the programs in Illinois largely.
Brendan, does your company, are they talking carbon sequestration as you think about your customers? Because everything seems to be about climate and carbon, just like Lauren said.
we've had discussions in the past, and Growmark has people on staff that have looked into this. They've done a lot of research on various programs. Ron and I have had many conversations about carbon and what to do. It's still kind of what I'm dealing with the people. There's a lot of questions that haven't been answered, because every year it seems like you have to do one more thing in order to get one more level. And then it also comes to, and which, to quote Ron, is that, say if you have you got a field that you put all the cover crops and things in, or if you need to do some tillage because of a big rain event or something to fill in areas, what happens? If you've sold carbons there, credits on that, are they going to allow you to do that? There's a lot of things, and those have probably been answered by now, but to be honest with you, the people that I had looking into it are kind of shying away just to see what's going to really come to fruition with it.
Can you answer that at all, Lauren?
I have a lot of questions about carbon markets, and in fact, I have an hour-and-a-half presentation on the issues. I obviously look at it as a recovering attorney, but those contracts that a farmer is required to sign are very onerous for a farmer to actually meet the demands, and they are long-term commitments and sometimes brand new companies or brand new aspects of a company. So I believe that the demand for soil carbon is legitimate. I think that our companies across our country are interested in documenting their carbon footprint and decreasing that. But I think it's very positive that farmers and agriculture could be a solution for them and for ourselves. But I think the details have yet to be worked out. So right now, I believe that farmers are sitting on quite a bit of leverage if they have the know-how, the interest, and the equipment to do a lot of these practices. I think they deserve a little bit more money per acre.
So you were asking about farm bills. That's something that comes from Congress, but then Lauren today in her address, the other part that comes from D.C. would be from the bureaucracy, for example, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and atrazine, and the importance not just of I talked to Brian Duncan about this, our vice president, who has spoken at the event and has been on this roundtable, of not just messing with atrazine, but just coming up with some random number of what should be the parts per billion. So you got a couple of things at risk here that's just could be an absolute game changer for not just Illinois farmers, but farmers all over.
David Zimmerman, talking about this carbon sequestration, how does this affect your company?
Well, carbon sequestration, you cannot go to a conference involving any type of fuel ethanol. That is the topic of discussion. That is what's coming down the pike for us, and many of you have probably seen that Big River has signed a letter of intent to sign on to one of the carbon pipelines crossing Iowa. In the years 24, 25, and 26 is when we expect completion. What's the driver of this? Now, you could say it's legislating action through the tax code. For me, the driver is economics. We have We have electric vehicles that seem to be very popular right now. We all know there are certain problems, there are certain sizable problems with electric vehicles and their ability to penetrate the transportation pool. We are tasked with being green. If we want to continue to be relevant, we have been tasked with being green, and that means reducing our carbon index score. I don't have a political dog in this fight, except that of my shareholders. And at this point in time, if we want to maintain viable corn markets in Galva, Illinois, in Monmouth, Illinois, in West Burlington, Illinois, excuse me, we have to look into this, and we have to try and remain competitive and support the value of our assets into the future.
Okay.